most of the 20th century, the intellectual and political leaders of the United States denied that the nation was an empire. Around 1994, things changed when neoconservatives aligned with the Project for New American Century, which openly embraced the idea of an American empire capable of ruling the post-Cold War world. The word empire shows how a word's significance changed at times of crisis. While PNAC's embrace of empire was a departure from the Cold War, framing the Soviet Union as an evil empire and the United States as a free world's defender, such an embrace was not a phenomenon. In 2003, Vice President Dick Cheney's Christmas card contained the following quotation, attributed to Benjamin Franklin: "And if a sparrow cannot fall to the ground the moment of the finding of the nation with arguments about the divine exceptionality of American empire." Many founders feared the closeness of other empires, including British, French, and Spanish in other parts of Americas. In competition with these powerful states, U.S. leaders often declared a natural right to the continent on the basis of both geographic and the ongoing practice of settlement and colonization by U.S. immigrants. Empire in this context named both a risk and an opportunity. Thomas Jefferson's Louisiana Purchase of 1803 pushed this question to a crisis by increasing the size of the United States and confirming the nation's imperial ambitions. Since then, many advocates of empire have stated that the United States increased freedom, space, and contributes to an empire for liberty, and others believe that the extensive territories endangers republicans. They are usually compared to the rise and the fall of other empires, including Rome, Spain, and England. The seizing of new territories reopened debates of the extension of slavery as well as the incorporation of Catholics and non-whites into the nation. Empire and slavery therefore become fatally conjoined, and the lands obtained after 1848 further divided the nation, pushing it towards civil war.
In the mid-century, many advocates of the word used the words other than empire to describe U.S. expansion, while John O'Sullivan stated that the nation's manifest destiny to overspread the continent, allowed by Providence for the free development of our dearly multiplied millions for the New England Puritans. The concept of manifest was defined as if the gods chose people in the Promised Land. This whole concept gave divine sanction to the U.S. expansion and made it feel natural and right to the white settlers, and of course their descendants, by shaping the common sense of scholars who distinguished continental expansions across North America from empire, understood as the possession of colonies and settlements overseas. For the scholars, this reenactment allowed them to believe that the United States did not act as an empire throughout the 19th century. During the times of 1890s, it became widely regarded within conventional histories as an aberrant period in which the United States uncharacteristically acted as an empire. This known as the overseas empire that required the extension and protection of networks of U.S. commercial interests, investment, and military bases in addition to or instead of the annexation of lands. It's commonly known that the United States tried to influence, control, and even taking over overseas places such as Cuba. But after 1890, this shift was more of an innovation empire administration than a break. The idea that the United States is an international police power defending civilization has often justified interventions in Latin America, although Frank Roosevelt's endorsement of empire differs from other seemingly benevolent attempts to build international institutions such as Woodrow Wilson funding, who had a vision of the United States as the World Cup.
The word empire became more and more synonymous with the United States as they continued to colonize indigenous people. This vision of turning the United States into an empire served as a useful tool to justify the horrible acts that were being committed to the natives of the land. This term also aided in disguising the foreign policy of imperialism that was taking place. The so-called emperors coming from overseas constantly redefined the meaning of what was foreign and what was considered homegrown. Through violence, the colonizers destroyed the indigenous population and made it known that they were now the natives to the land, despite having originated from thousands of miles away. In the 1960s and the 1970s, the term empire once again became very relevant, as it was used as a metaphor to represent the struggles of those who have been mistreated by people who held positions of power. Events such as the Civil Rights Movement displayed the oppression in which empires can have on the powerless, which is why these runs of supremacy often end with revolution. On another note, one way in which the term empire is used in pop culture is in sports. A few teams such as the San Antonio Spurs and the New England Patriots have been considered dynasties in their respective sports. In 2002, CEO of the Boston Red Sox, Larry Lucchino, referred to the dominant New York Yankees as the evil empire, relating the franchise to the likes of the Soviet Union in the 80s and the imposing villains in the Star Wars movies.
In American studies, the turn or return to empire was relatively late in coming. At the inception of cultural studies in the U.S. Academy, it was not a combination as its British counterpart, nor as invested in responding to contemporary social problems. The English department has its home in the United States, while the Center for Contemporary Cultural Studies at Birmingham. Its collective projects include the book The Empire Writes Back by Bill Ashcroft, were combinations of contemporary struggles. In the U.S., interdisciplinary and problem-based fields like ethnic studies often confronted the category of empire earlier because of their closer connection to social movement fighting against imperialism and colonialism, like the Shinkana movement and the anti-war movement. When we define American studies in terms of program and institutions, we must recognize the way it emerged as a post-World War II form of area studies that had ties on some campuses to the CIA Cold War, security state, and the organic grassroots terrorizing culture and power. Nowadays, the pressing question is whether American studies will be shaped in the future by disciplinary retrenching and possible tries to depoliticize the production of knowledge and cutting interdisciplinary programs. It should be strange to have empire removed from American studies lexicon, while debates over U.S. global military involvement in the fall of the American empire continues to make it meaningful to broader publics and audiences. As we reflect on the limits of empire as a model and consider the perils and possibilities of hemispheric and other frameworks. American studies scholars need the word empire to respond to what is happening to the world around us.
Empire has been redefined and incorporated in American studies instead of the primary focus on history and literature. The contribution of empire in American studies has been top discussion in journals. Caroline Leander and Robert Levine's book Hemispheric American Studies, editors focus on reframing disciplinary boundaries of American studies. Editors worry that empire studies tend to overlook the multiple incidents that compromise national communities in the Americas. Therefore, strategize to approach literary and cultural history from the vantage point of polycentric American hemisphere without favoritism. Amy Kaplan described hemisphere and empire as words that have vexed histories and neither can resolve issues of institutional and geopolitical power. There are three approaches presented to scholars about empire. All discussions of empire should evolve around transitional, historical, and comparative context, a complex of combination of diversified parts and voices of the world. Latin American studies scholars have used empire themselves and supported Kaplan's opinion for a long time. The contributors to hemispheric American studies contradicts the editor's ambitions to differentiate hemispheric from empire studies.